let's just get right on into it. Today we have doors galore, as you can see from the paintings behind me. And what I would like to do in this video is provide you all with some insight into how this all began with painting this sort of motif, and some things I've learned recently in terms of a new dimension of meaning or interpretation that this sort of motif has taken on for me in the past week or so. I'd also like to give you all 2 updates on some recent paintings. One, the results of the experiment I did with recreating the texture of frosted glass, an update on a current work in progress, another door, one that I'm really excited about, and also some technical things that I learned about the importance of priming your painting surface. Yeah, let's just get right on into it. By the way, if you're new here, hello, my name is Lauren. I am a self-taught artist. I work mostly with oil paints at the moment, and recently I've been painting a lot of doors. If you're interested in learning with me from my successes and my mistakes as a self-taught artist, and also if you're curious to hear my philosophical thoughts on my creative process and other stuff, consider subscribing and like this video if you end up liking it. Straight to the doors. So I want to start with the updates. First of all, what were the results of my experiment with the modeling paste? So I finished the piece, and I learned a couple things in the process. First of all, I thought that I really enjoyed painting on particle board, but then I just realized that it was only because that was the first time I was painting on a properly primed surface. Believe it or not, I have gone all this time without ever gessoing my canvases. I don't know how I made it this far without giving up entirely, because I'm just now realizing how much time I would have saved myself in the actual painting process by priming my canvases properly. For example, this piece, the original door, that piece, it took me like 6 months, and now I'm realizing that most of that time was just spent with me repainting the darkest values and oiling out and trying to figure out what I had even painted before, because the oils were sinking in so much that it was really hard for me to tell what the overall relationship of the darker values to the lighter values were in the piece. The new door, it's not even 2 weeks in the making, and I'm already so far along in the process. Just prime your canvases, guys. I know the store-bought canvases, the pre-wrapped canvases, they say they're already primed. Trust me, they're not primed enough. If you just do a couple more layers of gesso, sanding in between, as many times as you want until it's nice and smooth, trust me, it's gonna be a much more enjoyable painting experience. Maybe you already know this, but I sure didn't, so that's been super exciting and very motivating. It's like I'm learning how to paint all over again. But yes, back to the results of the experiment. Will I do that again? Probably not, and for at least 2 reasons. First of all, it didn't really click in my head that when I was taking a mold of the frosted glass and then I was pressing it into the painting surface, that the pattern of the frosted glass on the painting surface would be life-sized. And the painting itself, although it was quite large, it was 70 by 160 centimeters, I believe, it still wasn't fully life-size of the door. So when I was painting the image in the frosted glass, it was as if it was all zoomed in a little bit, because I naturally, intuitively just started painting along the textured surface that I had there. Second, painting over that texture, I thought it would be easier in the long run to have that, but it almost created new constraints for the painting process. Because the texture was so raised, it cast its own shadows, which complicated the painting process a little bit. And also, if I did want to go against the texture that was already there, it didn't really look right, because the texture was already there and it was already pulling so much of the weight in terms of the appearance of the painting that it put up too many restraints on where I could actually paint and how I could paint it. I am interested in using that mold, the silicone mold, to recreate the texture of frosted glass on non-door motifs. For example, portraits or still lives, where I want to mimic that pattern or appearance of frosted glass over a reference photo that's just not taken through frosted glass. I think that would be kind of interesting to explore. Now on to the more philosophical insight that I had recently regarding the door motif. The more that I paint frosted glass and the more familiar I become with how light bounces across that surface, the more I've been seeing that pattern everywhere. Like, there are squiggly lines in everything. So I'm going to read to you what I wrote and then kind of expand upon that with an earlier insight I had in the Slate Blue Journal. This is from 2023. So regarding the squiggly lines, it's not just squiggly lines. It's in everything. It's the pattern of both decay and growth. For example, paint chipping, vines growing, mycelium propagating across a substrate or mold, propagating across a surface. It is the pattern of movement, for example, blood coursing through veins, rain falling over glass, or water coursing through a river, of clouds dissipating, of roots branching. It is the symbol or pattern of both genesis and destruction. And in this sense, the door is no longer just a door, but rather a symbol of the inevitable movement of everything. I know that might sound a little bit dramatic, but if you've been here for a while, you know I'm a little bit dramatic about these things. To expand upon what I mean by that, I would like to quote a passage from Sebald's The Rings of Saturn. In it, he writes, "In every new thing there lies already the shadow of annihilation. For the history of every individual, of every social order, indeed of the whole world, does not describe an ever-widening, more and more wonderful arc, but rather follows a course which, once the meridian is reached, leads without fail down into the dark. Knowledge of that descent into the dark is inseparable from the belief in the day of resurrection, when, as in a theater, the last revolutions are ended, and the actors appear once more on stage to complete and make up the catastrophe of that great piece." This idea that the movement of time, the movement of history, both on like a macro scale in terms of like the planet and of nature, and also on the human scale in terms of personal growth and experiences, it's not an ever-widening arc, as Sebald puts it, but rather a reoccurring circle, a sort of eternal return, And when I say it's on a human level, I don't just mean like, yes, we're all mortal, we are all born and we all die. That's one of the, if not the only certainty of human existence, is that we will one day cease. But also in terms of like personal life lessons, like there's been plenty of times where I learned something at point A, at time A, and I apply it to my life, but it's not like a one and done thing, I have to sort of relearn it sometimes and remind myself of that life lesson as I face different scenarios and I encounter different people and situations to kind of return to that lesson in a new context. And so I don't know, I just really like the idea of the door motif. I think is in a way really good to express this. A door already is full of interpretive possibilities, What is a door? It's a liminal space. It's a threshold. It's the gateway from one thing to another, one time to another, one life to another. So that idea of transformation and sort of being in the in-between is already contained in the door motif. And I think the frosted glass, it appearing to be a sort of chaos contained within the orderly structure of a door frame. But now with this new dimension of interpretation, actually it goes to suggest that the chaos itself is the order, that this sort of never-ending movement and reoccurring pattern that up close looks very chaotic, when you take a step back, you can see the order in it and the trajectory of the movement of the squiggles. So yeah, that's what I've been thinking about. If you listened all the way through, thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that it provided you all with a little bit more insight into why I keep painting doors, why I can't stop painting doors. The motif continues to take on more levels of meaning for me beyond where it just began as like a door that looked nice. That's all for today. Hopefully this video comes together and it doesn't look too crazy. I hope everyone's having a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.